My parents passed away in a car accident not long after I was born. According to their will, the probate court assigned custody to my mother's younger sister, my Aunt Lily. At just 21, she was barely an adult herself, but she was my only living relative. What the court didn't anticipate was that Aunt Lily lacked the maturity, life experience, and most importantly, the right mindset to raise me like most boys. That's not to say she neglected me, just that her way of raising me was different. Aunt Lily had grown up without a father. My grandfather had abandoned the family, leaving my grandmother to raise both her daughters alone. After that, my grandmother became bitter and deeply distrustful of men. She raised her daughters to share that view. My mother somehow resisted that bitterness. She met my father, got married, and had me. Aunt Lily, on the other hand, internalized our grandmother's beliefs. As far as I know, she never dated and remained highly traditional in her thinking. This meant that I wasn't allowed to play with boys or even with girls my aunt disapproved of, which included anyone loud, bold, or too forward by her standards. One by one, she pushed away every potential playmate. Eventually, I was left without any friends at all. She raised me in a way that emphasized politeness, obedience, and sensitivity, traits more associated with girls than boys, especially in the eyes of other kids. As a result, I spent most of my time with adults, particularly women, who were more accepting of my quiet and thoughtful nature. Adult men were rarely part of my world. When they were usually tradesmen or husbands of my aunt's friends. Most of the time, I was kept away from them by Aunt Lily or the household staff. I gravitated toward the women around me, especially my aunt and her close friends. Aunt Lily gave me freedoms most children never had. I didn't attend public school. Thanks to our inheritance, she left her job as a certified teacher to focus entirely on my education. We spent nearly every moment together. She taught me literature, poetry, art, foreign languages, and refined social behavior. I joined her at concerts, art exhibits, and plays. I absorbed everything. By the time I was still a child, I could speak comfortably with adults about topics most kids didn't even know existed, especially topics that interested women. Aunt Lily closely supervised me in those early years. Wherever she went, I followed. That even included places most boys would never be taken. For example, she regularly went to a beauty salon for her hair and nails. Naturally, I went too. I would sit quietly and watch the transformations unfold. I was fascinated by the attention, the care, and the way the women carried themselves. Their conversations intrigued me, filled with candid thoughts and emotions rarely shared around men. Over time, I began to understand how they thought, how they expressed themselves, and what mattered to them. When we shopped together, she would often take me through upscale clothing and lingerie sections. I'd sit quietly in dressing rooms while she tried on outfits, always graceful, always perfectly styled. Despite her distrust of men, Aunt Lily had impeccable fashion sense and took pride in her appearance. She once told me, "I dress for myself, no one else." I always suspected that while she claimed to ignore male attention, she secretly enjoyed being admired, if only to remind herself that she didn't need anyone's approval. Auntie never felt uncomfortable letting me see her try on clothes or in different states of undress if a snooty saleswoman dared to. Look askance. My aunt either left the store immediately or asked for another sales lady. This closeness between us didn't change like it does for most boys. Until I was just past my 12th birthday. At which time she finally decided I was too old to go along with her inside these special places for women only, not because she was ever embarrassed but because the other women in the dressing areas were becoming nervous by my presence. I didn't realize till much later in my childhood how these shopping trips with my aunt would help me. She must have suspected, even though I myself didn't at the time, that I really enjoyed these excursions with her into the world of women's fashions. Aunt Lily was very popular and had many friends when we visited the homes of her female friends. I of course went with her, she never left. Left me in the hands of a sitter and also felt that it wasn't the responsibility of either the maid or the cook to watch me. Her lady friends eventually came to accept my constant presence at all of their social functions, even when their own children, some younger than I, would be outside playing together or had been left at home in the care of a babysitter. In the beginning I would sit quietly and unnoticed, secretly listening to their conversations. Early on, Auntie had warned me never to speak out or to divulge anything I might have overheard. As the women gained confidence that their conversations would remain private, their fear of my exposing their secrets lessened and finally disappeared altogether. As I grew a little older, I was allowed to leave my chair and play with my miniature cars around the dining room table, never far from where Auntie sat while the women talked. If their husbands were in attendance, they always adjourned to the family room and the kids went out to play. No matter whose house we were visiting, the ladies stayed and talked while the men left to watch TV or play cards. After a while, involved in their conversations, they would totally forget I was crawling around the floor at their feet. One day, after Thanksgiving dinner and the cleanup had been completed, I was once again on the floor playing with my toys. I must have been about 7 at the time. One of my toy cars accidentally rolled under the long dining table, completely out of sight. The women, all dressed up in their best holiday outfits and totally relaxed, after the huge meal, had moved to the far end of the table so they could talk without being disturbed by the men, who were again watching an endless series of football games. Not wishing to interrupt my aunt or her friends, I gently lifted the drape of the lace tablecloth and silently crawled under the table from the end opposite from where they sat. It was difficult to see where my toy car might have rolled because the tablecloth blocked out most of the light. After my eyes became accustomed to the semi-darkness, I began to search for my lost toy, crawling from one end of the table towards the other, being extremely careful not to bump into any outstretched legs. I crawled through the forest of nylon-clad legs stretched before me towards where I supposed my toy had rolled. Suddenly my progress was blocked by 2 sets of nylon-clad legs ahead and also behind me. Having nowhere to go, I was forced to sit and wait until my escape route reopened. Bored at having to wait, I looked around and inadvertently discovered I was able to see up the casually sped legs of the 2 women on either side of me. Slipping lower to the carpet enabled me to easily see up past their spread knees beyond where their nylons met the guards, all the way to where their thighs joined their bodies. A flashback of a previous visit with my aunt to a store dressing room enabled me to recall the name of the garment to which the garters were attached. A girdle. Most of the women, I later realized, didn't really need the benefits derived from a girdle. They just never dressed up without wearing one. Auntie later told me it was a southern thing at my young age. Seeing up their legs wasn't attractive but instead humorous, covering my mouth so as not to laugh and thereby give myself away. My eyes strained to see between one woman's open thighs and the other's, looking under their casually display skirts. I was spellbound by the 2 different styles of girdles and panties they wore. In my mind I tried to remember which women's legs were displayed before me. Unsuccessfully. Oh, how wonderful it must feel against their skin to wear such beautiful underclothes, I silently mused. When the space under the table finally cleared, I started to move back across the floor, curious about the variety of women's clothing I had seen earlier. As I silently slid from one chair to the next, I took mental notes, observing patterns, colors, and how stockings were fastened. I knew I shouldn't linger and felt nervous about being caught. Just as I began to turn around, I accidentally brushed against a dangling shoe as one of the women shifted in her seat. She said lightly, "Oops, I hope I didn't kick someone just now." The women paused, looking around at one another. When it became clear she hadn't nudged any of them, they all, including Aunt Lily, lifted the tablecloth and peeked underneath. I quickly looked down at the carpet and pretended to search for something. "What are you doing under there, young man?" one asked, suspiciously. "Yes, why are you crawling around under the table?" another chimed in. I turned toward Aunt Lily and replied as innocently as I could, "My red car rolled under one of the chairs. I couldn't see anything with the tablecloth down. Could someone help me find it, please? It's my favorite." Whether by luck or instinct, my answer came across as honest and polite. The women, realizing it would have been too dark under the table to see anything clearly, chuckled at themselves for having jumped to the wrong conclusion. A few even seemed embarrassed for having assumed the worst. To make it up to me, and perhaps to Aunt Lily as well, they began helping me look for the toy. One woman found it resting near her chair, where it had been hidden from view. My young age, the dim lighting, and their own discovery of the toy convinced them I hadn't done anything inappropriate. I thanked them and crawled out. As I left, I overheard one of them say, "We must have been overreacting." If it were any other boy, especially my own sons, I might have believed it. But Robert's the most polite young man I've met. "Lily, you've done a wonderful job with him. He's a little gentleman." Another added, "He's so well-mannered, and I wish my boys were more like him." These days, boys think being respectful makes them weak. One even joked, "He's adorable. Maybe he'll marry my daughter someday, she could do far worse." That night, I thought back to what had happened. I realized I enjoyed watching how women dressed and admired the colors, textures, and elegance of their clothing. I especially noticed the sound of fabrics as they moved. Before falling asleep, one thought echoed in my mind: I wished I could wear beautiful clothes like Aunt Lily and her friends. From then on, whenever the ladies gathered, I'd occasionally find reasons to be near them, sometimes under the table, sometimes just close enough to watch and listen. Most of the time I went unnoticed, and even when I didn't, the worst I faced was being gently asked to move somewhere else. Eventually, the women stopped reacting. On occasion, when someone accidentally bumped into someone else, they'd playfully apologize to me instead of each other, whether I was under the table or not. Sometimes, one might adjust her skirt more carefully if she remembered I could be nearby, but most of the time they didn't seem to mind. Over time, Aunt Lily began asking for my opinion on her outfit choices. She seemed to trust my eye, and that encouraged me to start paying more attention to women's fashion. I began studying different materials, cuts, styles, and colors, trying to understand what made certain clothes appealing. Whenever I had free time, I would secretly flip through department store catalogs and Aunt Lily's fashion magazines, focusing on clothing, shoes, and the art of how women presented themselves. I memorized the different types and styles of women's clothing, studying every article I could find about fabrics and how they moved when worn. As I learned more, I became increasingly curious about the various undergarments women used to shape their figures. Many of these items seemed unusual to me, with their straps, padding, and tight designs. At that age, I couldn't fully understand why women would wear something that looked, at least from my perspective, uncomfortable. Driven by curiosity, I would sometimes sneak into Aunt Lily's room to look through her closet and drawers, especially when I was sure no one would notice. I recalled a phrase she often repeated: "Experience is the best teacher." One day, those words encouraged me to take it a step further. I carefully selected a few of her garments, choosing a bra, a pair of matching underwear, a girdle, sheer nylons, a dress, and some heels, and tried them on. I wanted to understand how they felt, how they worked, and why women wore them. At first, it felt awkward, not nearly as uncomfortable as I had imagined, but still unfamiliar. Looking at my reflection, I saw a small boy swimming in oversized clothing. I hadn't thought to adjust the fit or use anything to fill out the dress properly. The outfit was mismatched, the slip hung lower than the hem, and the dress didn't sit right. I hadn't applied any makeup or added accessories. I hadn't considered how posture, movement, and gestures play a role in appearance. Still, despite looking out of place, I discovered something valuable: how these garments contributed to a woman's silhouette. That insight had been my goal from the start, and it gave me a sense of satisfaction. Occasionally, I found myself wanting to repeat the experience, not out of vanity, but because I appreciated the texture and design of the clothing. Over time, I tried on different outfits, noting their feel, style, and construction. It was a personal, quiet exploration. Aunt Lily was deeply involved in women's organizations and regularly attended events that supported women's rights. As a child, my presence at these functions didn't raise eyebrows. She was a respected figure in those circles, known for her intelligence, independence, and leadership. Her financial freedom gave her confidence and allowed her to engage with the world on her own terms. Because I always behaved properly, I was also welcomed by the women she surrounded herself with. They saw me as a well-mannered young boy, soft-spoken, gentle, and respectful. Aunt Lily often received compliments on my conduct, and I could see how proud it made her. That brought us even closer. As these women often belonged to multiple groups, I became a familiar face and was eventually accepted as a kind of junior member. Some joked that I was their little ambassador in training, a symbol of how boys could grow up respectful and understanding of women. Over time, I gained their trust. I was often present for their meetings, where they discussed ideas and shared personal stories. Because I was always around, many of them began asking me for help with small things: adjusting a blouse button, straightening a seam, brushing off a shoulder, or aligning a zipper. These little gestures became common, and for them, it was simply convenient. I was respectful, available, and attentive. It became a bit of a light-hearted routine, me offering help, and them appreciating it with laughter or a playful remark. I viewed it as a way to be useful and part of the group, and it deepened my understanding of the effort women put into presenting themselves with care and confidence. In the beginning, the women would playfully challenge one another to see who would be the first to decline a request for help. Those who hesitated were gently teased, which encouraged more and more tasks to be handed to me. Soon, I found myself doing all sorts of things: painting their nails, massaging tired feet and legs, and brushing their hair. Rather than disliking these tasks as many boys might, I found myself enjoying them. They made me feel included. As I entered my teenage years, I began to appreciate these moments more deeply. I started seeking out ways to spend time with the women, to be part of their world. The hugs, the attention, and the friendly affection they showed became comforting and something I looked forward to. Over time, as I became more knowledgeable about women's fashion and appearance, they began asking for my honest opinion on their outfits, hairstyles, and the way things fit. I always answered truthfully, but with care, never wanting to offend. A compliment here and there, when someone wore something particularly flattering or changed her hair, quickly became a way to endear myself to them even further. My remarks were genuine, and in return, they showered me with appreciation and affection, which I quietly treasured during my adolescence. Eventually, my daydreams evolved. At first, I imagined myself in Aunt Lily's shoes, what it might feel like to wear her clothes, to walk like her, to move as she did. I envisioned dresses swirling around my legs, the sensation of nylons, and the quiet rhythm of heels tapping across a floor. But those fantasies soon changed. Instead of imagining myself as Aunt Lily, I began to see myself as her daughter. That shift made the daydreams more satisfying. As her daughter, I could share her world completely. We could go shopping together and try on dresses side by side, have our nails done, and chat over lunch. The idea of belonging so naturally in that space, of being seen and treated as one of the girls, made me feel closer to that imagined identity. Because I was always present, the women grew relaxed around me. They no longer worried about acting overly modest in my presence. Some teased me affectionately, and I was often welcomed with warmth, allowed to sit with them, joke with them, even rest beside them when they were preparing for events. I made sure to stay respectful and mindful of the space I was in, never letting my growing curiosity cross the boundaries they had set, whether knowingly or not. Whether my aunt ever guessed how much I had come to care about these experiences, I can't say. She never said a word. But I felt a quiet understanding had formed between us, and I protected that bond. I knew the women placed great value on appearances and self-respect, and being accepted so fully into their world made me feel special, trusted in a way that not many boys my age were. At one point, the women's groups were planning a large rally in the city park to promote gender equality. A pre-event meeting had very low attendance, which visibly worried my aunt. Seeing her concern, I offered to join the women to help make their numbers appear stronger. At first, some members hesitated. Since I wasn't female, they worried it might appear I had been pressured to attend, which could dilute the rally's message. As they debated, Aunt Lily suddenly smiled. She turned to me and asked, "Robert, do you really want to help us? Would you be willing to do whatever's needed to make this rally a success?" "Aunt Lily, I'm willing to help however I can," I said without hesitation. "Excellent," she replied. "What we really need is one more woman in the crowd. My idea is to present you as my niece. With the right clothing, hairstyle, and a little coaching, you could pass convincingly. Even one more voice in support matters. So tell me, are you ready to commit, or are you just another boy who only talks big?" This wasn't what I had expected. Looking around the room at the hopeful eyes fixed on me, I suddenly realized this moment meant more than just playing along. If I refused, I'd risk losing the trust and affection I had built with my aunt and her friends. I'd no longer be seen as someone safe or reliable in their world. I made my decision quickly. Their acceptance was far more valuable to me than any discomfort I might feel. Deep down, I also felt a quiet excitement at the thought of stepping into their world so openly with their encouragement. I nodded, a bit shyly, and replied softly, "I'll do whatever you need." The women broke into applause, offering hugs and warm encouragement. Once the excitement settled, they quickly organized what was needed. 3 of the ladies volunteered to go gather the clothes and accessories that would help me become Eve, the name they chose, inspired by the idea of transformation and new beginnings. We had a few hours before the rally. The others began calling absent members, telling them about my decision. That conversation sparked a change. Many of those who had originally declined now felt compelled to attend. By the time the calls ended, 28 more women had promised to join the rally. With each update, I was treated like a small hero, or rather, a heroine. When the 3 women returned with their arms full of bags, the transformation began. I was handed a fresh outfit and turned to step away, but Aunt Lily stopped me with a firm voice. "Eve, there's no time for modesty, we've got work to do. We need to get you dressed and show you how to walk, sit, and carry yourself properly." Whenever she used that tone, I knew not to argue. 2 of the women helped me into the new clothes. They wrapped a supportive waist cincher around me, followed by nylons, a fitted bra, and a soft slip edged with lace. The main piece was a powder blue silk dress that buttoned in the front, paired with modest heels. They completed the look with accessories: a long blonde wig, subtle makeup, nail polish, earrings, and jewelry. Once everything was in place, I looked at myself in the mirror and couldn't believe the change. Unlike my earlier private experiments, this transformation had been done with care and skill. My figure appeared noticeably different. Everything fit. Everything felt right. This wasn't just about clothes, it was about the feeling of confidence and elegance they gave. I understood, maybe for the first time, why Aunt Lily always emphasized grace, poise, and presentation. I didn't feel silly. I felt composed, aware, and oddly at peace. There was a strange but pleasant sense of belonging. The 2 women who had helped were clearly proud of their work, and the others offered compliments all around. With time running short, it was decided we'd skip voice coaching for now and instead focus on posture, movement, and etiquette. Every little adjustment, how I walked, sat, and gestured made a difference. The clothing seemed to shape how I moved, and in turn, how I felt. It wasn't just a disguise. It was a lesson in stepping into someone else's experience, and I was determined to get it right. I had never truly understood the challenges or the quiet joys that came with wearing women's clothing until that day. I learned how to sit with grace, how to adjust a skirt modestly, and how to walk with a gentle sway of the hips instead of leading with the shoulders. Through each moment of coaching and instruction, I never lost the internal sense of femininity and, perhaps more profoundly, the feeling of being beautiful. For the first time, I found myself wondering how different life might have been if I had been born and raised as a girl. With every new experience, I grew more certain that I would have embraced that life with joy. I didn't just admire femininity from afar anymore, I was experiencing it, and it felt natural. Aunt Lily quietly took my hand and led me away from the others. She leaned in and whispered, "You're enjoying this, aren't you, Eve? I've been watching you. You love how it feels to look beautiful, and you do. You're lovely." She smiled and continued, "Let me tell you something. I like seeing you this way too. Honestly, I think you look better as my niece than you ever did as my nephew. And I've known for a while you've been sneaking into my room, trying on my clothes. That's actually where I got the idea for today." Her voice softened. "It's thrilling, isn't it? Living in this world as a girl. What if I told you that you didn't have to go back? What if I said you could continue dressing like this, with my help and permission? In fact, what if you became my niece full-time?" She let the thought linger before continuing, "Just imagine all the things we could share as two women. Trips to the beauty salon, shopping together, trying on dresses in the changing rooms instead of waiting outside. We'd laugh, chat, and yes, maybe even turn a few heads." She looked into my eyes with warmth. "Think about the comfort of relaxing at home in soft, beautiful clothes, the feeling of going to bed wrapped in something light and elegant. Imagine being able to express that side of yourself every day, not just for pretend. Wouldn't that be wonderful?" I stood there, stunned. Part of me was overwhelmed. But another part, stronger, clearer, felt seen, understood, and deeply excited at the thought. So many thoughts flooded my mind, questions and doubts, but with each hesitation, a deeper joy outweighed it. Every concern seemed smaller when compared to how right it felt. When I finally ran out of reasons to hold back, I knew what I needed to say. I stepped forward and embraced her tightly. With a quiet breath, I whispered, "Please, Aunt Lily, let me be your niece. I didn't realize how much I needed this until now. I feel alive, more myself than I've ever felt. I want this. I want to feel this way every day. I want to be Eve." She held me close, and I knew that something had changed, not just in how I saw myself, but in how the world around me would see me from then on.